Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our second part of my interview with Sister Michelle Renee Davis from Philadelphia. Really important conversation to have, and I'm glad we're able to, have her on to let her voice be heard on a lot of these important topics. You mentioned, kind of feminism and how it kind of ripped apart the Black family. So a lot of these. I guess, from the political on the political right, they tend to be, about more anti feminist. But at the same time, there's the other problem that, excuse me, my kitty. Sorry. um, is the other issue that they tend to have more, I guess, racist people in their ranks. So it's almost like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So it's almost like, like for Muslims, it's like we need to have like a third position on like these topics, because it's, like on the left side, on the right side, it sounds like, there's a lot of anti-Islam sentiment there, and a lot of, racism there. um Even though, they, purport, encourage more like stronger family values, and they're more pushing back against a lot of things that they're being taught to our kids in schools, unfortunately. Don't want to get into too much detail. And then on the other side, you have the left, who, tries to cater to the Muslim community, but at the same time, a lot of their positions are just completely against our faith, theologically.
Mhm.
So do you think that like Muslims should be, apolitical and not align themselves with any, on the traditional left and right spectrum, or do you think that, you know, Muslims should, like have this sort of block where we advocate for our own issues, and just and try to do and try to influence politics on like any level? What do you think we should do?
So in America, people are influenced by money. Now, I tell people this all the time. We always like to say, oh, Black people, we're broke, we're poor, we're this, we're that. Even though we spend $1 trillion and things are fueled by money. People care about money because the bottom line is, yes, racism is a problem, but our racism is actually not our biggest problem. And I know that might sound like, but it's obvious. No, our biggest problem is class. It's class. And because while we're bickering and fighting about race back and forth, oh, you still in their jobs, you're doing this. The rich are getting richer and the poor is getting poor. And it created this divide so that people don't realize the biggest problem. In Philadelphia right now, it's going through this process of gentrification. And soon, no one is going to be able to, unless you got have money, to live here.
Mhm.
There are apartments that's $2,000, $1,500. Houses, it's coming to a point where you're not even going to be able to own, because a lot of these corporations are buying up property and having people rent. There's a buyer's market at this time. And that's our biggest issue, is money. And if even if just Black people, even though I recommend all poor people, cool, need to start withholding their money and spending it in small businesses in their community.
Mm.
Because I bet you 1,000,000 to 1, if Black people decided not to shop at Target, Target is going to be like, oh, wait, listen, I bet you they're going to, you want a Black CEO? Like, what is it that you want? If people, and I'm bad at this, I'm one of those people. I shop on Amazon like it's Tic Tacs. Probably should stop, you know. But if we was to do that, where we started withholding our finances, start building our own stuff and buy within our own communities. And when I mean by within our own community, I mean literally, if you have to catch the bus to go somewhere, then you shouldn't be buying it. Like a lot of times we think that we need all this stuff. We need the Birkin bags and the red bottom shoes that is rent, and all the stuff that makes absolutely no sense, that does not matter. You got all this stuff, but you're miserable. And
Yeah.
some people don't even know that they're miserable.
Yeah.
Our biggest issue is class.
Yeah. I grew up in a small town outside of Windsor, Ontario, and Windsor used to be a very working class, city compared to like giant Canadian cities like Toronto and Montreal, and rent in the early 2000s, even in the I think yeah in 2013, I was able to get a 1 bedroom apartment with a parking space included for $595 a month, all included, and that's Canadian. So it comes to about like maybe $400 US per month. That was in 20, I think 14. And now, because everyone in Toronto is retiring and moving out of the city, a lot of the rich people from Toronto are buying up all of these houses and apartment buildings, renovating them and jacking up the price. So now that same apartment in Windsor is going to cost like $1,300, so more than double. And the price of houses in the area has just skyrocketed. So a house that was like $100,000 in the early mid 2000s in Windsor is worth about $400,000 today. So and I just don't understand how people are going to be able to afford this. And you have, like you said, mega corporations coming in and just buying up all these apartment buildings, maybe painting the walls or putting in new flooring and just doubling the price on the rent. And I don't understand how anyone, no matter where they come from, is going to be able to afford these houses and apartments. It's really unfortunate. And like you said, like we need to spend our money wisely and invest locally. Because a lot of these small businesses are going to go under, and just these giant big box corporations like your Walmarts and your like Staples, they're just going to completely run everyone out of town. So yeah, I mean, it's really going to have to think going forward, because it's not going to get any better unless we think locally in that respect. So
And
go ahead.
no, because I wanted to add to that, because it's this thing called Gini coefficient, and I think people should look into that as GINI coefficient, and basically they have like computed how, like I think it's like a number where as the equality continues to, so they do the equality ladder, like money, and then across the board. And we're actually in America past the threshold that normal countries would actually go into civil war, because of the inequalities. And this is how that the workings of divide and conquer works so well, is that we were able to get in this country, we were able to get past that, and people don't have civil unrest. And it's civil unrest, but no, they have no one to organize it. Everybody is suspicious of each other, and it just allow it to continue to happen, and it's going to get worse.
SubhanAllah, may Allah protect us. It's not gonna. It's really dark to think about, but I mean, or tragic to think about. But inshallah, we can try to improve the situation. Okay, let's get into some of the line of work that you do, Michelle, which is really fascinating stuff. You are, I think your work is in therapy, and you deal with a lot of like patients who have problems related to trauma, and specifically dealing with Muslim communities. I think a lot of in many Muslim, communities like the Arab and the South Asian Muslim communities, it's stuff that really don't talk about. And I think, like for us, especially people who converted to Islam, no matter what your background is, like you bring in a lot of people who are very sincere and want to become a good part of the Muslim community, but they have, a lot of a baggage before they convert. So tell us about some of the work that you do in that regard, Michelle.
Yeah. So I have my master's degree in trauma therapy. Well, it's called counseling psychology, but my track was trauma. I went on to become licensed. So a lot of my work that I've done a lot of it is drug and alcohol. And what I basically do is I call myself I call it relational trauma, because a lot of those things it's really about your relationships that you have with other people that informs you about who you are. So one of the things that I think people don't understand is I don't care who you are, where your background is, what's going on. You have some form of trauma, because we're not perfect. Your family may have taught you better coping strategies and things like that will allow you to become more well adjusted. But we all have something that we carry around with us that, skews our thinking patterns. And what I try to do is line who you are, your beliefs, and what really happened up so that it can make sense. So a lot of the distress comes about is because we try to ignore the obvious things. So like, for example, a lot of people don't even know that, especially I find this with men, that they secretly hate their mother, for whatever reason.
Oh, wow.
Because we have this thing where regardless, you love your mother, blah, 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 she can do no wrong. You love her, love her, love her. But if you have a child who their mom used to throw shoes that they hated at 5 years old and told them how you this or you that and blah, 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 the distress is coming in because we're not looking at our parents as human. So it's not that I try to help people, teach them like, hate your mother, but it's like, no, she harmed you. And it's okay to be sad about the harm that was done to you. However, your mom is human. She's not God, so trying to put people back into their rightful places, because sometimes we don't put people where they belong. And it creates a lot of distress because part of us in our mind that we don't realize is conscious, we want to rebel against it. But our super ego, which is, religion and all that, keep us in check. But enough's want to break out. But what we need to do is find a balance in between, where we address the situation and then we move forward and forgive people, forgive ourselves, but also too sometimes realizing that something is not always wrong. Sometimes it's just preference. And I tell it to people all the time, they'll be upset about something that their spouse did. And I'll be like, is it wrong or is it a preference? And they'll be like, what was a preference? Okay, so now that we know that it's a preference, is your anger succeeding a little bit? They were like, yeah, because they realize they put in this expectation somewhere that it doesn't belong. So basically what I'm correcting people's thinking patterns about how they view stuff. And then once we do that, and then it's like, and also while instilling self-esteem and self-worth in there so that you can be mentally and emotionally strong. But what I find in our community is people are religiously abused. People don't talk about that. Like they always know about the physical abuse, it's starting to come about like emotional abuse. But people don't talk about the spiritual abuse, where they'll tell you something that is based in truth, but they're using it for their own benefit to keep you in line. And what they don't understand, what's so funny about it is because, Allah talks about how Shaitan will take you from 4 ways, from the front, back, left, right. And what they don't realize is when you're doing it, when you're spiritually abusing someone, you're actually following the guidance of Shaitan when he attacks you from the right.
Mm.
He tells you that you should do those things because it's the right thing to do, because it's spiritual principles, but we know that your intentions is not that. So like for example, and I'm just as hypothetical, this never happened, but like say if a, because I like to use extreme examples because people understand. Like just say a husband come in and be like, listen, I want you to have sex with this woman because that's what I like to say. I want to see that. And you're like, no. And I'm like, I'm your husband. You're supposed to obey your husband. That's true. You're supposed to obey your husband. And people will do stuff like that, not that specific scenario, but it's just to get them to understand the concept of how people use it, or what's something that's oh, you supposed to what is, because I know like a lot of men they use that, like you're supposed to obey your husband, or I've seen, and it goes both ways. I've seen women say like, oh, my husband's not leading me, he's not doing this, he's not doing that, and then they try to elevate themselves and be like, before he came along, I was doing this and I was doing that. And I'm like, sis, you don't even know the Fatiha, and I know you don't. But it's abusive. You point the finger at so many people and not even realizing, even like with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Islam first started, he brought it down in stages. But for some odd reason, people think that when you become Muslim, you just perfect. You're praying 5 times a day. You just magically know Arabic, the Fatiha, everything is just happening.
Which it's not true.
It's
not true at all.
It's not true.
No.
So a lot of times what I try to do is fix people's belief patterns. That's just, it's, some of them are logical fallacies, and thinking errors that they have. Which when you start to fix it, you start to have more relief, because you're not holding to this stringent thought process. So that's basically what I try to do in a nutshell.
Very important work. And I know for a lot of converts, I've even heard stories of some sisters who converted to Islam, and right after they take their shahada, the imam will literally take out a piece of paper from like the drawer in his in his office and say, okay, here's a list of brothers that you can that want to get married to a convert. Like right out, and then just like what a disaster. And like a lot of converts will get into these marriages right away because they don't want to commit zina, but they don't know the first thing about Islam. They're marrying a total stranger. The cultural differences are just immense, and even the converts themselves have a lot of baggage. So I wanted to ask, because with the Arab Muslim community, they have kind of like this system where the father will like seek out a spouse for their son or daughter. So they'll look into the family history and see like what kind of history they have, what their son or daughter's like, what the family's like, if they think the cultures will be compatible. And even for the Desi, the South Asian Muslim community, it's even more involved in that. They'll go almost almost the arranged marriage route. But when it comes to the African American Muslim community, do they kind of have like the same matchmaker system in place, or is it varied? And like it's great that you're doing this kind of work, Michelle. But I think what the Muslim community recommends for a lot of these converts, getting married right away, I don't think that they address these issues before they actually get married. So, is it an epidemic? Like what I've seen with white converts is like most of the 80 to 90% of these marriages end in divorce, very ugly divorces. Are you kind of seeing the same thing, Michelle? Or
I find it to be worse.
oh my.
I find it to be worse. I think in our community, it's like this double-edged sword. It's get married, get married, get married, But if you don't like it, divorce, 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 divorce.
Mm.
Now, granted, some people you need to divorce them like yesterday, because they are not well. And a lot of our people, when it comes to relationships, are not well. And they're not well because they don't see modeled marriages working because of the divide of habit, so like my mother at this point, she has been in a relationship with her spouse for like 11 years. Now Eric, like, oh my God, that's such a long time. And he's a drunk and he pays no bills and he does absolutely nothing. That's my example.
Mm.
Before then, my dad, he was very abusive. That's my example. So when you have those kinds of examples and you get into relationships, those things come out and they play out in your marriage. And as you so like I'm 34 and I'm just hypothetically guess because it's probably it. So I've been married 5 times. And it's because I reenact my own trauma. That's what people don't understand too, is until you identify something, you're going to continue to reenact the same kind of patterns over and over and over again. You're going to find the same kind of spouse over and over and over and over again, which in it of itself is not horrible, but what you need to start allowing things to happen is people going to get the help that they need. So even like, so I've had 2 marriages that actually lasted 2 days. I know, like, how does that even happen?
I've seen it happen before. Don't feel bad.
I just, no, the one just came in the house and was like, you know what? I don't think I'm ready for this. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. And then I had one where I told him, like, listen, I'm okay with polygyny, but I'm not going to be in polygyny with someone who's a heroin addict. He was like, no. I divorced her, blah, blah, blah. Because when we married, they were already divorced. And she was going through at that period. And that wasn't really the case. And I said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not bringing that in. I said, because regardless of you saying that that's your marriage, it's going to impact all of us, period. And I think like a lot of us, we have a bunch of people who are broken, trying to get into relationships with other broken people and trying to fix other broken people while we're broken. And it's just this cycle. And I find that, and this is sad, I find that people love the idea of me, but not really understanding what that actually means. Because I'm a therapist, unfortunately. So certain things just be like, no, we're not doing that. And people become frustrated, and I get it because I've learned that, again, like I said, like certain things are preference. I've learned that some things are a preference that I don't complain about. But also I know that when I do stuff that's maladaptive, that's wrong, that I shouldn't be doing, I learned how to take accountability, acknowledge it, but forgive myself for it too. So when I'm having a discussion about something that I've done wrong, a lot of times I've had spouses, they'll be upset with me because because people get used to the dysfunction. They're upset that I'm not arguing about it because they want to argue because they're hurt. I get that you're hurt. We can talk about it, but I'm not going to argue about it because for me, I took it to a law. I asked for forgiveness. He said that he's going, if I'm forgiven for it, he's not going to bring it up. So why would I bring it up? And I understand that you're not a law. So I'm not going to say, well, you should forget about it like he did. No, I'm not going to expect that from you. We can talk about it. But I think that people want you to be upset about stuff that have harmed them, which I get. but that serves you, it doesn't serve me.
Right.
and and I I try to teach that to other people of learning how when you mess up, take accountability for it, but don't hold it over your head.
Mm.
And vice versa, don't hold it on their head. Once y'all talk about it and y'all really get through it, that's it. That's
Mhm.
it. If the person keeps doing it, you also got to remember too, depending on what it is, because if it's like violence or something, like please leave.
Mhm.
But if it's something small and minute where it's just irritating, you got to understand that even if the person said, yes, I'm going to change this, if they're 40 years old and they've been doing it for 20 years, it's not going to happen overnight.
Mhm.
That's where you have grace and mercy.
Mhm.
And people don't want to do that. They don't want to have the grace and mercy when it comes to being inside of a marriage. And I think, especially for um, African Americans, we've been through a lot culturally. So it's this healing process, and everybody's not at the same place.
Mm.
And choosing your partner wisely, I think I always say, like, when I think about who I want to be with, I say, your baggage is your baggage, as long as you're not abusive, a cheater, or other things. But if you're trying to get better, whatever that may mean, I'm
Mm.
okay with that.
Mhm.
Because that's what it's about. It's about striving and it's about trying. Um, but if you continue to always look at your partner about what they're doing wrong, it's going to be the same cycle.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same cycle. But people don't want to get the help that they need, but they'll buy a Birkin bag.
Yeah. I know, and then and for the like born Muslim communities, I think their way of dealing with it is it's always like the family's heavily involved with like a lot of this stuff. Like they don't want their son-in-law, their daughter-in-law to get out of line, and there's going to be consequences if they treat their son or daughter poorly. But I think for a lot of converts, our entire families are not Muslim, so they're usually not involved with our marriages at all,
Mhm.
and that creates its own sets of problems. But I can definitely hear a lot of similarities in what you're talking about, Michelle, vis-a-vis white converts to Islam, even though our experiences have been I guess like you said, culturally and historically have been completely different, and our experiences coming to into Islam. So having said that, I guess it'll kind of talk about the next part that I wanted to talk about, and that is that what we're doing here is kind of like a different approach to what do we do because as as you probably know, like usually when a white person converts to Islam, like the experience at the mosque is very different, than when black people convert to Islam. Specifically, a lot of us were given like high positions in mosque that we never deserved. Uh,
Mhm.
that were like a square peg for a round hole. We get all these marriage requests, and like a lot of them times, a lot of these, you know, uh, Arab and Desi run masjids, they want to kind of turn us into this white savior. Where like they take this white convert guy and give him like a thobe and like a turban, and the next week he's giving the khutbah at the mosque, and like because I think in their head they're thinking like this guy is gonna he's gonna convert all of his friends and family to Islam, and he's gonna be our representative, and like, and there's definitely like a racial element involved. I think a lot of them they think when an African American converts to Islam in their mosque, they think, okay, well, Black Americans are already quote unquote on our side, so there's less of a need for them to give these guys the same status as opposed to like the white guy who converts to Islam. And like we looked at this and was just like, what, like this is just not working. And the other approach is like you convert to Islam and you completely assimilate. But again, I mean, at the end of the day, like our total a lot of usually when we convert to Islam, none of our friends or family are Muslim. Like you may have like a Muslim uncle or aunt, and like you said, like you had a friend who was already Muslim. So Islam was already kind of a fabric of the African American cultural experience. Whereas for us, we're seen as like complete traitors. So, and then the other extreme is like, the hard line, like, I guess what Daniel's trying to do is like this right approach where like you sort of LARP as like a, as a white supremacist and try to, like create our own little niche that way. And so we don't agree with either of these approaches. So I wanted to get your input, Michelle, because this is like something totally different we're trying to do in that we understand that like all these different Muslim sub communities, they have their own thing going on. They have their own historical and cultural experience with Islam and being in United States as a minority community, and we understand that we've never lived through that, and that we're not. They love the fact that we converted to Islam, but we're not going to trying to have us fit into these masjids where um, our needs aren't going to get addressed, and just throwing money at the problem is just adding to white supremacy. And it's really torn apart the relationship between African American Muslims and white Muslims, which is sad because we can't really talk about these things openly and honestly. So what's I know that's a lot to digest right now, Michelle, but what is your take on it? Like, what do you think is the best thing that we should do, being converts to Islam and also being white Muslims? I mean, what do you think? Do you think we're on the right track, or do you think that there's something that we need to change?
I think I believe like when it comes to like racial stuff, I'm really not sure.
Hmm.
And the reason why I'm not sure is because, having Trump become, president over here, and the outcomes and how people are behaving shows that what happened really was, it wasn't so much that we were getting better, it's just people we were not talking about it.
Hmm.
What I do think though is what the first step and that could happen that's takes little effort on people's behalf is being mindful of how your language, right?
Hmm.
Language, people don't realize how powerful words are. And so it's certain words that I no longer use. Like when people are like, oh, the actress Monique, she was blackballed. I don't say stuff like that no more. I don't assign color to right and wrong. Because even though you may say like, but why? Like if she was blackballed and that means that it's wrong, what people don't understand is your subconscious makes connections. Your subconscious is like a computer. It's not going to rationally think about, oh, blackball is because it's a bad thing over here. But when I see a black person, your mind's going to make the connection that black is bad. So it starts to become general because your mind, because it's a computer, it want to work as fast as it can. So it's going to make association so you don't have to think as much. So like for example, let's just say like you get attacked by somebody that wears a red cap, and then every time you see somebody with a red cap, you become, like anxious. It's because your mind associated the red with the attack, because it needs to be able to fight, flight, or freeze instantly and be able to, protect itself. So being mindful of the words that you use is so, so important.
I agree.
And taking certain things just out of it. So I don't be like, oh, that's a white lie. No, it's just a lie.
True.
It's just a lie.
Yeah, I don't even use the term race. I mean, like the word race. You had your interview with Bilal. Like it comes from rasa, which is this term that like people are in these different peoples are in competition with one another, and it's all about who's going to come out on top. This kind of Nietzschean like worldview. so I don't even, I mean, like Allah created us into tribes and nations, like
Mhm.
shu'ub wa qaba'ila. And even shab is different than I mean, shab, it basically means a piece of something that used to be together,
Mhm.
because we're all from Adam and Eve, and we all, have the same common ancestor. So even though shab is like, like is refers to a specific nation, Allah is, telling us that, like we belong to different tribes and nations, but we used to be, part of the same
Mhm.
common ancestor. So, like I think that is really important. I think that I don't need, so I don't use the term race. And even the our group itself is, it's not Islam for whites, it's Islam for Europeans, because white, it has, like you said, I mean, you can probably elaborate this, it has such a negative connotation to it, and it creates, this kind, it just all relates back to, the fact that, Europeans that came here were all amalgamated into this kind of white American
Mhm.
mix. And like our traditional cultures, like the Italian culture, the French culture, the Irish culture, like that was like erased, and like sort of melded into this group that has been historically oppressing people who aren't white. So I mean, in Europe, even Europe, among Europeans, like Spaniards and Portuguese and Southern Italians, their skin tone is darker than many Asians and Arabs. So even that, we didn't want to be called Islam. It's just would be a terrible name, and that's why it's Islam for Europeans. But even that, like so many negative images get conjured up, because like a lot of people would think like, what, you don't want Islam for other people, and no, that's not true either. I mean, like what about the Native American community? I mean, they have their own enormous struggles as well. And
Mhm.
if Islam for First Nations, or if they wanted to start their own group, we would be totally supportive of that as well. So I think, I completely agree with you, Michelle, that like language is so important, and we're going to say things that are going to, that we don't even realize um, is going to be bad, usage, that we think that's not going to be a problem with it, but to our African American brothers and sisters, or to Native Americans, like it's going to be offensive to them.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, like, and that's why I want to keep these conversations going. I mean, I don't know, was there anything I said in that
No,
in this?
no, I agree. No, I
Yeah.
agree. And I think that just because, like, because even like seeing it was like Europeans for Islam, I didn't see nothing wrong with it. I just, because to me, the plights of your people. Like it's not nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I think what the problem is, people think that just because you are for something, it automatically means that you are against something else. And like two things can be opposite and both be true.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Like it's you don't have to, it's not one or the other,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, like all the things that that you're saying about the African American Muslim community, we totally support that. I mean, we would love to see a revival of of Islam in the African American community. But like you said, like it has to be done by the African, by our African American brothers and sisters. I mean, we would love to donate, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be the experts on how to repair that, because we don't live in those communities. I mean, like, and I think that's the problem with Daniel's approach, in that it's, and other people, Muslims approach, in that we're thinking that we're all just one group. Because at the end of the day, if you take that approach, it's going to be one group running the show. Um, but yeah, we're almost out of time. Let's go to part three, Michelle. Well, I'm going to come right back, just like before. We're going to cut out of time. But thank you for being on the show, Michelle. We'll be right back with Islam for Europeans. My name is Robert. Please subscribe, and please subscribe to Michelle's channel as well.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, thank you.
Right. Mhm.